Unlock the door to mystery with one very short story. The micro-podcast filled with morally complex characters, twists you won't predict, and endings you won't forget. Every episode is a brief, intense journey, perfect for listeners who crave mystery, intrigue, and stories that leave you thinking long after the tale ends. Today's episode begins now. Ever think about trophies? The kind killers keep. A ring, a picture, sometimes worse. People call them souvenirs, but that's not it. It's power, control, a way to taste the rush again. Now here's the part that gets under my skin. The arrogance. Not hiding them in a box under the bed. No. Putting them out in the open, on a shelf, on the wall. Right where you and I could see them, except we don't. That's confidence. That's the high. The belief that you're untouchable, that your darkest secrets vanish in plain sight. And to me, that's colder than the killing. Crazy idea, I know, but it's what crawled into my head when I was writing today's episode. I know I'm not the only one with weird midnight notions. Look me up on my website, jlstroudjr.com, and let me know what strange things stalk you in the dead of night. The thoughts you don't say out loud, the ones that only breathe when the world goes quiet. Go ahead. I'm waiting to read your comments. The gallery. Truth is, some paintings are meant to kill you. Elena Rossetti found that out the hard way, standing in the back room of her Buckhead gallery at 2 a.m, staring at Marcus Hale's latest masterpiece like it was a loaded gun pointed at her chest. The piece hung there under a single desk lamp. Elysian Fields, he'd called it. Pretentious bastard. But the swirls of deep blue and ochre in the lower left corner weren't just paint on canvas. They were a map. An eerie treasure map to a fresh grave. She'd been watching the news all day. Body found in Stone Mountain Park. Young woman, missing for 3 weeks. The kind of story that makes you lock your doors and check the shadows twice. But Elena wasn't thinking about shadows. She was thinking about topography. The geological survey map of Stone Mountain lay spread across her desk like a confession. Those distinctive swirls in Hale's painting, they matched the contour lines around the burial site. Every curve, every depression, every place where water pooled after the rain. Her hands shook as she pulled out 2 more paintings from the storage room. Older pieces, sold months ago to private collectors who paid cash and asked no questions. She cross-referenced them with missing persons reports she'd pulled from the Atlanta PD website. The pattern was there, ugly as a cigarette burn on cheap leather. Marcus Hale wasn't just painting landscapes. He was painting graveyards. Elena had connections, old money, old favors, old debts that still carried weight in this city. She bypassed the beat cops and the desk sergeants, went straight to the top. One phone call to a university friend who'd married into the mayor's office. Another to a collector who sat on the police foundation board. By dawn, her call had landed on Detective Anna Mercer's desk. Mercer knew the name Marcus Hale before she even picked up the phone. Hell, everyone in Atlanta knew Marcus Hale, the golden boy of the Southern art scene. The man who painted beauty from decay, who found poetry in the ruins of the old Fourth Ward and made millionaires weep over abandoned warehouses. She'd met him once, years back, when she was still in uniform, and he was just another pretty boy with a paintbrush and a trust fund. He'd been charming then, dangerous in the way that rich men with good cheekbones always are. Now she sat in her Crown Vic outside Elena's gallery, watching the morning light cut through the Buckhead haze like a blade through silk. The call had been vague. Art dealer with information about the Stone Mountain case. Possible connection to other disappearances. In Atlanta PD, you learned to read between the lines. Rich white woman calls about rich white artist. You pay attention. Not because you want to, but because the alternative is career suicide. Mercer stubbed out her cigarette and walked into the gallery. Elena Rossetti looked like money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Understated jewelry, perfect posture, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. She led Mercer to the back room without small talk. Detective Mercer, thank you for coming. Ms. Rossetti, you said you had information about the Stone Mountain case. Elena gestured to the desk, where 3 paintings lay side by side, each one tagged with a case number and a date. I think Marcus Hale is encoding murder locations in his artwork. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Mercer stepped closer. The paintings were beautiful in that way that expensive things always are. Layers of meaning wrapped in technique that cost more than most people made in a year. But Elena was right. The geographical correlations were there, subtle as a whisper, but clear as a confession once you knew what to look for. How long have you suspected this? Since yesterday, since I saw the news about Stone Mountain and recognized the terrain. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. I've sold 12 of his pieces in the past 2 years, all landscapes, all featuring distinctive geographical markers. 12 paintings, 12 potential crime scenes. Mercer felt something cold settle in her stomach. I'm going to need copies of everything. Sales records, provenance documentation, contact information for the buyers. Already prepared. Elena handed her a manila folder thick as a phone book. Detective, there's something else you should know. Marcus Hale isn't just any artist. He's connected. City council members, federal judges, the kind of people who make phone calls that end careers. Are you trying to warn me off? Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. I'm trying to warn you what you're walking into. This isn't just about art, detective. It's about power. And in Atlanta, power has a long memory and sharp teeth. Mercer spent the next 48 hours building a case that would hold water in court and survive the political storm that was coming. She cross-referenced Elena's documentation with missing persons reports, matched geographical markers with crime scene photos, built a timeline that connected dots across 2 years of disappearances. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Hale's paintings contained encoded geographical data that corresponded to burial sites with an accuracy that couldn't be explained by coincidence. Financial records showed payments to a defunct security firm that had employed 2 of the victims as part-time consultants. Getting the search warrant required calling in favors and making promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Judge Morrison owed her one from a domestic violence case that had saved his daughter's life. He signed the warrant at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, no questions asked. Hale's studio sat in a converted warehouse in the Virginia Highland District, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. The kind of space that screamed artistic authenticity while costing more per month than most people's mortgages. The search yielded nothing. To nothing. The studio was pristine, organized, sterile as a hospital operating room. Brushes arranged by size, paints sorted by color temperature, canvases stacked with military precision. No personal items, No sketches. No preliminary work. It was the studio of a man who knew someone was coming. But the paintings themselves told a different story. Forensic analysis revealed layers of technique that went beyond artistic expression. Complex brushwork that encoded topographical data. Color combinations that corresponded to soil composition and water table depths. The kind of detail that required intimate knowledge of burial sites. Mercer had her smoking gun. She just didn't know it was pointed at her own head. The call came from Deputy Chief Strickland at 6 a.m. on a Friday. His voice carried the weight of 30 years on the force and the kind of authority that didn't ask twice. My office, now. Strickland's office overlooked Centennial Olympic Park, all glass and steel and the illusion of transparency. The walls were decorated with commendations, photographs with politicians, and a small abstract painting that Mercer now recognized as an unsigned Hale original. Detective Mercer, sit down. She remained standing. Sir, this Marcus Hale business. You're stirring up a hornet's nest. I'm investigating a serial killer, sir. You're harassing a respected member of the community based on the fantasies of an art dealer with a grudge. Strickland's voice was low, dangerous. Hale's attorney has filed a complaint. Harassment, unlawful search, defamation. The search was legal. The warrant was obtained under questionable circumstances. The evidence is speculative at best. And the political ramifications. Strickland gestured to a photograph on his desk showing him shaking hands with the governor. This department doesn't need that kind of attention. Mercer felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Sir, with respect, we have 12 potential victims and a clear pattern of... What we have is a detective with a history of overreach pursuing a vendetta against a man whose only crime is being successful. Strickland opened a file folder. Your record shows a pattern of insubordination, detective. The Henderson case. The Morrison shooting. Always pushing boundaries. Always making enemies. The file contained her entire career, dissected and reframed as evidence of instability. Every difficult case, every time she'd chosen justice over politics. Every moment she'd refused to look the other way. All of it twisted into a narrative of a rogue cop with poor judgment. I'm reassigning you to cold cases, effective immediately. Detective Carter will take over the Stone Mountain investigation. Carter doesn't know the case. He doesn't understand the connections. Carter understands chain of command, something you seem to have forgotten. Strickland closed the file with the finality of a coffin lid. This conversation is over, detective. I suggest you remember which side your bread is buttered on. Mercer walked out of that office knowing she'd been played. The system had closed ranks around Marcus Hale like antibodies around an infection. The evidence would disappear. The witnesses would recant. The case would die a quiet death in the cold case files. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Mercer brought Hale in anyway. Insubordination was a small price to pay for looking a killer in the eye. The interview room at Atlanta PD was designed to break people down. Fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps. Concrete walls painted the color of despair. A metal table bolted to the floor, and 2 chairs that had heard more confessions than a Catholic priest. Marcus Hale looked like he was posing for a magazine cover. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of calm that came from knowing you were untouchable. His lawyer sat beside him, a shark in Armani who'd made his reputation defending the kind of people who bought their way out of consequences. Mr. Hale, thank you for coming in voluntarily. Of course, detective. Always happy to help Atlanta's finest. His smile was warm, practiced, the smile of a man who'd charmed his way through life and left bodies in his wake. Mercer placed the first photograph on the table. Crime scene photo from Stone Mountain. Do you recognize this location? Should I? It's the subject of your painting, Elysian Fields. The geographical features match exactly. Hale leaned forward, studying the photograph with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. Interesting. I suppose there are only so many ways to arrange rocks and trees. The correlation is precise, Mr. Hale, down to the water drainage patterns and soil composition. I'm a very observant artist, Detective. I notice details that others miss. The lawyer shifted in his seat. Detective, unless you have specific questions about my client's artwork, I fail to see the relevance. The relevance is that 3 women are dead, and their burial sites correspond exactly to locations depicted in your client's paintings. Hale's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of surprise or concern. Just that same calm interest, like they were discussing the weather. Art imitates life, Detective. Or perhaps life imitates art. It's an old philosophical question. Mercer placed the second photograph on the table, then the third. Each one a crime scene that matched a Hale painting with surgical precision. Can you explain why your artistic vision consistently predicts murder locations, Mr. Hale? I paint what I see, Detective. Beauty in decay, poetry in destruction, the hidden language of landscape. His voice was soft, almost hypnotic. Perhaps I simply have a gift for seeing what others cannot. Or perhaps you have intimate knowledge of where bodies are buried. The lawyer's hand shot up. Detective, that's enough. You're making accusations without evidence. The evidence is sitting right there. Mercer tapped the photographs. 12 paintings, 12 crime scenes, 12 dead women. Hale tilted his head, studying her with the same detached interest he'd shown the crime scene photos. You know, Detective, there's something beautiful about your dedication. Tragic, really. Like watching someone chase shadows while the sun sets behind them. Is that a confession, Mr. Hale? It's an observation about the nature of truth and the futility of seeking it in a world that prefers comfortable lies. The interview continued for 2 hours. Hale answered every question with the same chilling calm, never quite confessing, but never quite denying. His alibis were airtight, provided by judges and city councilmen, and the kind of people whose word carried more weight than evidence. When it was over, Mercer knew she'd been in the presence of a predator. A killer so confident in his protection that he could sit across from a detective and all but admit his crimes without fear of consequence. The lawyer gathered his papers with the satisfied air of a man who'd won before the game began. Detective, I trust this fishing expedition is concluded. My client has been more than cooperative. Hale stood, straightening his tie with the casual precision of a man adjusting a noose. Detective Mercer, it's been illuminating. I hope you find what you're looking for, though I suspect you already have, and simply lack the courage to accept it. He walked out of that interview room like he owned the building. And maybe he did. The reversal came swift as a knife between the ribs. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into Mercer's conduct within 24 hours of the interview. Unauthorized interrogation, harassment of a prominent citizen, abuse of authority. The charges piled up like bodies in a morgue. The evidence from Hale's studio disappeared from the secure storage facility. Computer glitch, they said. System malfunction. The kind of technical failure that happened when powerful people made phone calls to the right IT departments. Detective Carter, her replacement on the case, filed a report that painted Mercer as an unstable officer pursuing a personal vendetta. The financial records linking Hale to the victims vanished from the database. The forensic analysis of the paintings was deemed inadmissible due to chain of custody issues. Elena Rossetti recanted her statement, claimed she'd been mistaken about the geographical correlations. Artistic interpretation, she said. Coincidence. The kind of backpedaling that happened when gallery owners received visits from men in expensive suits who spoke softly about insurance policies and fire hazards. Mercer watched her case disintegrate like sugar in acid. Every piece of evidence challenged, every witness silenced, every connection severed by lawyers who billed more per hour than she made in a month. The media painted her as a rogue cop with a history of overreach. Anonymous sources leaked details of her past cases, her personal life, her financial troubles. Character assassination performed with surgical precision by professionals who knew how to destroy a reputation without leaving fingerprints. She was suspended pending investigation, then terminated for cause, pension revoked, benefits canceled. 20 years of service erased with the stroke of a pen. The system had spoken. Marcus Hale was untouchable. 3 months later, Mercer sat in her studio apartment in East Atlanta, watching the evening news on a television she'd bought at a pawn shop. The anchor was smiling as she announced the opening of Marcus Hale's new exhibition at the High Museum. Metamorphosis, they called it. A celebration of transformation and renewal. The mayor was there, cutting the ribbon with golden scissors. The governor sent a congratulatory letter. Art critics praised Hale's evolution as an artist, his deeper understanding of the human condition. The camera panned across the crowd of admirers, all of them dressed in their finest clothes, sipping champagne and discussing the profound beauty of Hale's latest work. Deputy Chief Strickland was there, beaming like a proud father as he posed for photographs with the artist. Then the camera focused on the centerpiece of the exhibition. Resolution, the placard read. A massive canvas dominated the gallery's main wall, all sweeping brushstrokes and vibrant colors that seemed to pulse with life. The crowd gathered around it like pilgrims at a shrine, their faces reflecting the painting's ethereal glow. Mercer recognized the style immediately, the subtle encoding, the geographical markers hidden in plain sight. The painting depicted a serene landscape in fernbank forest, all dappled sunlight and ancient oaks. Beautiful, peaceful, perfect. The news report cut to a different story. Body discovered in fernbank forest that morning. Young woman, missing for 2 weeks. The kind of story that made people shake their heads and lock their doors. Mercer turned off the television and sat in the darkness of her apartment, listening to the sound of traffic on Moreland Avenue and the distant hum of the city that had chewed her up and spit her out. Marcus Hale was still painting, still killing, still encoding his crimes in masterpieces that hung in galleries and private collections, admired by people who saw only beauty where others saw death. The system had protected him. The institution had survived. Justice was just another word that meant nothing when spoken by the wrong people. Somewhere in Buckhead, Elena Rossetti was probably closing her gallery for the night, trying not to think about the paintings she'd sold and the bodies they represented. Somewhere in City Hall, Deputy Chief Strickland was planning his next promotion, his conscience as clean as his record. And somewhere in his pristine studio, Marcus Hale was preparing his next canvas, mixing colors that would map another grave, planning another masterpiece that would hang in plain sight while the world applauded his genius. The gallery remained open. The artist continued his work. The bodies kept accumulating. Truth was, some paintings were meant to kill you. The rest were just meant to help you forget. Thanks for listening to one very short story. If today's story hooked you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us grow and keeps the suspense coming your way. Want to dive deeper? Check out the podcast description to learn more about the show and explore special offers from our sponsor. Until next time, keep dodging bullets and stay safe in the shadows.